Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a cat behavior and more podcast, hosted by me, Christina Wilson, animal behaviorist. Today's guest is Stacy LeBaron, the head cat behind the Community Cats podcast. We discuss the critical role of TNR programs, the importance of education and community engagement, and practical tips for managing cat colonies. She also shares insights into collaborative efforts that make spay-neuter initiatives sustainable and how small actions like using paper collars can make a big difference. So tune in. Welcome to another episode of Hiss and Tell. I'm your host, Christina Wilson, and with me today is Stacy LeBaron, head cat of the Community Cats podcast. Welcome, Stacy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're absolutely welcome. I'm so excited for our discussion today. Let's start off with just like a little bit about you, your background, your education, how you got into working with cats and cat welfare and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I've been involved with cats, specifically in animal welfare, since 1994. So I guess we're going to say 30 years, unfortunately. I guess it's going to share my age. Before that time, I was in college getting a degree in urban planning. So where does that take you? Urban planning straight to cats. Who would have thought? And so I grew up with cats my whole life, but I always had one cat at a time, but really enjoyed them. And in 1994, I found out about this group, the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. And in Newburyport, Massachusetts, they were doing some great work with cats on the waterfront. And I joined their board of directors as a volunteer. And it kind of grew from there, one step in front of the other. And I was president in 1996, and I was president and executive director for 16 years after that, growing the organization from about $45,000 a year to about $1.4 million a year.
Wow.
So really grew it up. Yeah. And, we wanted to be sort of the cutting edge group across the nation, really caring for cats, providing for cats, not just doing adoption, not just doing Trap-Neuter-Return. We wanted to do it all. Whatever the cats and the families' needs were, we were going to take care of them in that Newburyport area. So I love planning. I like working with people, and I love cats. And so it just worked out for me.
Have you found that your education actually in urban planning has helped at all in your work with especially cats in cities?
Well, so actually, urban planning is good because it's trying to have a respect and understanding for the political process as well as the physical space that's out there, and understanding the limitations or the possibilities for how you could treat cats in the community. We have urban cats, we have community cats that are outdoors that need a different type of support than an infrastructure than our indoor cats need. So it helped me get perspective on how people behave and how you can use sort of the built environment to allow for community to behave in a better way. It's interesting. I was just reading a book about how there are some urban planners who believe that some plans have been designed with a bias towards men versus women. Because in Sweden, this was a study in Sweden, that they said, men like to drive to work more than women. Women are oftentimes dragging, kids to school and on the sidewalks. And like when a snowstorm happens, they plow the roads first, not the sidewalks. And then, people are in the hospitals because they've fallen on the sidewalk. And when they changed the plan to do the sidewalks, clean the sidewalks first before the roads, the injuries in the emergency rooms went way down. And so it's interesting that just a simple shift in that focus really changed outcomes. So it's sort of an understanding of what goes on in our communities and how can we change perceptions and outcomes, for our cats.
Absolutely. I feel like that could be its own podcast episode on its own. That's so interesting. Like I have so many thoughts just about that study, but they're not necessarily about cats. So I'm going to shut up, not talk about them here. Can you tell us just really for our listeners, what defines a community cat and how do they differ or they don't differ from owned cats or stray cats or feral cats, which I know is always a hot button definition. What's a community cat?
So my definition of a community cat is any cat that's outdoors with four paws on the ground. So any cat that's outside is a community cat. I do believe also that our indoor only cats are community cats because they have the potential of getting outside too, but they play a sort of a different, they're more of a supporting actor or actress in this story about community cats. So really, any cat that's out there, tipped or not tipped. So what does that mean? When a cat is tipped, it has a little snip taken off of its left ear on the East Coast, its right ear on the West Coast. And it is identifying that cat as being a sterilized community cat or a spayed or neutered community cat or a fixed community cat, depending on what language you want to use. And so so that helps to identify our population that's out there. But any cat with four paws outdoors, on the ground, that's a cat or kitten, either one. There we go.
Okay. What's with the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast ear tips? Is that like a rap battle? Like East Coast, West Coast, rap scene? Like I had no idea that we tip differently on the West Coast. Is that did that just happen differently? Or is it so that we know, oh, this cat has come all the way over here from LA. It's made this great journey. Like what's going on with that?
I don't know the origins of the story. I don't know if it was somebody, just read the memo wrong on the East Coast people with the left ear tip and they somehow got it confused. I mean, there are some organizations also that, they ear tip on the right for male cat, ear tip on the left for the female cat. There are fewer ones that do it that way.
Yeah.
But it seems like Washington State and Oregon and California, those three states primarily ear tip on the right. And then there is a point sort of in Colorado in that where it shifts. And it seems like Midwest and Eastern tend to tip on the left. And so I'm not 100% sure how that all originated, but we have a t-shirt that talks about ear tipping on the East and the West, just as a way to educate folks. So in general, if you see a flat snip across the ear, you can pretty well think that cat is spayed or neutered.
Sure. I love thinking that there's this rivalry going on between community cats in the East Coast and the left coast because they've got different ear tips. I'm an idiot. Don't worry about me. Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about the weekend conferences that you've organized? I was reading on your website that you have an online cat conference, you have the United Spay Alliance conference, and then you have the online kitten conference. So tell us a little bit about all of these great conferences that you're doing.
Yeah, so sure. So really, when I started the Community Cats podcast in 2016, and it was really, I had been running a mentoring program, and I was able to help about 80 groups to start TNR programs. And I had 400 groups on my waiting list when I left the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. So we started the podcast as a way to, provide more information and assistance and help to those that there's that energy. There was a need. There's a huge demand to be able to help community cats. We're here to turn your passion for cats into action. That is what we are all about. And so we provide over 30 educational events during the course of the year, virtual events. Anybody can join. I don't care who you are. We try to keep them all affordable. And so we have 3 weekend events, the online cat conference, the online kitten conference, and then the United Spay Alliance conference. Obviously, we can't do much TNR if we can't neuter the cats, right? If we can't get them spayed or neutered, it's impossible if we can't sterilize the cats.
Yeah.
So the United Spay Alliance conference is incredibly important because we want to increase our capacity to be able to spay neuter cats. Cats are great reproducers, and we want to stop that insanity. And so that's part of, we look at creative solutions, workarounds, efficiencies to be able to get more cats done in private practice as well as in our clinics. We have our online kitten conference, which is in partnership with the National Kitten Coalition. All things kitten. We have to deal with kittens, unfortunately.
Of course.
I look at any feral kitten. I had a moment back in the 90s when there were, 35 kittens living out of a dumpster behind a bar. And, they all had runny, goopy eyes. I mean, we've all heard the story. We see the adults off in the woods. And I'm like, you know what? I don't like this picture. We're not going to see this again. This does not need to happen if we have enough spay neuter capacity out there.
Right.
But we do have kittens. We're rescuing kittens. We need to have the tools to be able to deal with them. So that's what the online kitten conference is all about. We have our United Spay Alliance conferences every October. The online kitten conference is every June, and our online cat conference, which is pretty much anything else that you might want to talk about with regards to community cats, we'll cover it there. So we've done profiles of community cat management. What does it mean to be a community cat program manager? What is the legislation like? What does it mean to do advocacy for community cats? How do you start a program? How to start a TNR program? We have all of the recordings of our past conferences are on our YouTube channel. And again, education and resources. We want to get you, if you have a passion for cats and you want to do something, we want to help give you those tools to make you be successful. And that's all what we're about. So we have certification programs too. So run the gamut. We've got free, and we have affordable sessions. And again, if anybody's got an idea of something we're missing, we're happy to listen and put it right into our educational program.
All right. Well, maybe you'll hear some ideas from listeners.
That'd be great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the TNR certification class that you do, I think, via Neighborhood Cats?
Boy, about 3 years ago, I think we started partnering with Neighborhood Cats. We do monthly TNR certification workshops. Usually it's the first Saturday of the month. It's a 2 hours, 45-minute training. That you go through virtually, and then there's a quiz that you take at the end in order to get TNR certified. There are quite a few organizations out there that if you want to volunteer for them, or if you want access to a discounted price at their spay neuter clinic, they're going to ask that you get TNR certified. And honestly, you want to know what you're doing with those cats, because I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they go, I learned the hard way. This happened and I learned the hard way. So this is a way so you don't have to learn the hard way. It's, we're going to tell you all about the things, what to do and what not to do, what to watch out for, how to work with a variety of different traps. We do have to trap our community cats. They can bite, and we don't want them to bite us. That's the last thing you want to do is have a bite situation. So
yes,
you just have to be really, really thoughtful and careful. Every cat is cute. We all think they're cute, but we have to be really careful when we're dealing with our community cats, even if it's a stray or if it's a cat we know that's like a lost cat or a missing cat. They're in an environment they're not familiar with. And so that's why it's really important. We're so careful that we just use the trap technology as a way to get those cats. And we've got so many advancements in this area that it's really, there's no reason not to use the trapping equipment to get those cats. But every month we are live with the TNR certification workshop. Folks can watch a recording instead during the course of the week. They don't have to be there present, and they can still get certified. So if you work on Saturdays, don't worry about it. You still can get certified.
And again, I just want to encourage everyone to go to Neighborhood Cats and get your TNR certification. It really is helpful. Like Stacy said, don't get yourself injured. Before I was a behaviorist, but when I was still doing a lot of cat work, I did the stupid thing and I stuck my hand in a car engine to pull a feral cat out that I had already been working with, who was living in our house and who ran out. And I got 18 bites and ended up in the hospital for a few days. So just, an anecdote to... they will bite you when they're freaked out. And that was real dumb. So don't be like me. Take the class and learn to not be a dum-dum. That's my warning. Can you explain the paper collar that you have on your website? I was, looking around recently and saw this paper collar that you have for people to download. And I thought it was such a cool idea and something that had never obviously occurred to me. So perhaps you could explain that to everyone.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know. I don't really know how the lore got started, but in Massachusetts in general, I've been a moderator of a group called Mass Cats, which is it's like a Google Groups type thing to cover Massachusetts cat rescue and that kind of thing. And I'd say in general, there's always been a lot of concerns since 2000. The Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society has has held Sunday spay neuter clinics for feral cats and or for community cats. So there's always been a lot of concern. Are you stealing somebody's cat? Are you trapping
Yes.
somebody's cat? And all that kind of stuff. So what we do as a general protocol is we say to the community, if you think you have a stray cat in your backyard that needs assistance, that is friendly, put a paper collar on that cat with your phone number and see if there's somebody else that cares for that cat. And in every situation in the last 2 years that I've had that question posed to me and they've used the paper collar, they have found somebody who has fed that cat.
Oh, awesome.
And right. So it results in a tremendous amount of success.
Yes.
And obviously it prevents that cat even entering the system in any way, shape, or form. And so we use that across the board. And if it comes off, it's easy, it's cheap, it doesn't cost any money. So we have this template we just created to help really further. So an organization, I know there's been a lot of stress with the shelters with with the overpopulation of cats and dogs in shelters. And so if people call in and they say, hey, I've got a stray, you need to take the stray in, if they could just say, use the collar, use a paper collar, I think most of 80%, 90% of those calls would just not even result in that cat making an impact on the facility. And that's obviously saving lives, and obviously it's saving resources, and it's enabling, organizations to focus where they really should be focused on, which is, dealing with little kittens that are going to die during the course of the year and all that other stuff.
No, I agree. And I think it would be really useful if people can post about this in their local Facebook groups or in their local next door, because that's where at least I see all the time people being like, here's a blurry picture of this cat that always comes into my yard. Does anyone know this cat? Like, it's friendly, and there's always this discourse of, well, you should do this. And I don't know whose cat, there's always these arguments, a lot of things that I think would be solved with a paper collar. So can you tell us a little bit about the primary challenges that are faced by community cats and how those challenges impact their welfare and the communities that they inhabit? I know it's kind of like a mouthful of a question.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, usually the people are the challenges for community cats to a certain degree, right? I mean, there's different levels of challenges for community cats depending on where they are located.
Yes.
So Newburyport, Massachusetts, where I was located for quite a few years, home of the piping plover, right? So we were all in, the bird haven central. And so you would think that there would be a lot of conflicts between bird and cat there because we've read so much about it. However, luckily, Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society got to the region before the birders did. So we got there and we were able to get the population of cats reduced significantly enough so that we never had any real trouble with the bird organizations. They actually embraced us because they knew at the end of the day that we were taking in cats from the communities that were most impacted. So if you have a transient population that are living in a beach community that, they're coming and going, that at the end of August when the rentals are up, that there's going to be people that are needy of rescue assistance for those cats because they're not going to be able to move with those pets. And you want to encourage them to surrender those cats and not leave them where they are in those sensitive areas. Now, in other parts of the community, you might have a different response where you might wait until there's room at the inn, I call it, right? So if your shelter is overflowing with cats and you've got a request for assistance on a friendly cat that you can't, assist, maybe find somebody to feed the cat outside for a couple of months and then you can bring it in when you have capacity. So we operated as an open admission but no kill organization, which meant we were working with the community to find out the best solutions possible for each cat and their family, depending on where they are. So we had to triage with different types of protocols. So, a community cat's going to have a different response maybe than, obviously than in like a barn situation. If you've got a friendly barn cat that just needs to be spayed or neutered, you'll do that. Or if somebody's moving and the only reason they can't take their cat with them is that cat's not spayed or neutered, well, I'm going to spay neuter that cat and let them take the cat with them, of course, right? And then, so there's a lot of programs out there that, I guess the word is diversion these days. We're trying to have these diversion programs. And I think that's something that we always were doing from day one, which is let's listen to the family and let's look at the cat and the cat situation. and just try to find a solution that works for all parties. And it's not just like it must be adoption or intake and surrender, or it must be, must be this or it must be that, return to field. It's more of a nuanced conversation and working with the community. So I'd say the greatest risk, for community cats are the areas where they just don't have access to spay neuter. I mean, that's the huge risk, is if you don't have access to spay neuter or access to a Renaissance type program that can cover all these different capacities. And it doesn't have to be one organization. It could be a group of organizations, but they provide all the services. So you have like one group that does neonatal kittens, right? You've got another group that's providing affordable, helping with assistance on dentals or care for older cats so that people can keep their cats, so that you're preventing economic euthanasia. So it doesn't have to be a one organization thing. It could be a collaborative effort within the community. And so much of our efforts are discussed in a targeted mindset. So each community has this basket of resources and assistance. And again, it doesn't even have to be animal welfare groups. I mean, in Vermont, I run a group called Positive Pantry, and we raise money to pay for pet food, to go through the distribution network of the Vermont Food Bank. And so they're able to provide 140 food shelves with pet food.
That's great.
That they weren't able to before because of a collaborative effort with us. But we're not schlepping that food, all around the state. We're using their distribution system.
That's amazing. So because you touched on a little bit in what you were just saying, can you tell me a little bit about the surrender prevention workshop that you have?
Yeah, sure. So again, in that process of diversion, one of the things, and being a cat behaviorist, obviously this is, near and dear to your heart. I call it, in my short version, I call it the Lift the Lid certification workshop, because so much of the conversation is usually folks calling up to an adoption center and they're saying, my cat's peeing outside of the litter box. I need to surrender my cat.
Yes.
Right. And so you just take a deep breath. So I just know where you're at on that run. Right. What we're all about is, again, trying to create avenues so that then these cats don't have to come in. People care about their cats, but they just don't have that type of information that they need. And usually when they call the shelter or the adoption center, they're at wit's end. They're like, I'm done. And so you become therapist as well as motivator. And so you're just like, okay, let's breathe. Let's take a minute. And so the Surrender Prevention Certification Program with Dr. Rachel Geller is a program designed for animal shelters who are dealing with that intake process, the triage, and training those frontline folks how to divert those surrender requests in such a way where there's a positive outcome for the family and for the cat.
Okay. That's awesome. And yeah, I will just say for my own practice, and again, people are self-selecting the people that I see, right? So there are people who are still in the game. I think it's very different who comes to a cat behaviorist versus who would go to a dog behaviorist. I think cat problems tend to be left until people have had it. And then they're like, oh, what can I do to solve this? Whereas now the cat is on so many behavior loops and there's so many like additional things going on. You really have to work at untangling this mess. But inappropriate urination is for sure, I'd say 75% of my clients, because it's such a huge issue that's very nuanced often and very difficult for people to tackle. And the kind of general ed that's out there on the internet is not awesome. It's not often correct. And it's just a huge problem. And so I think especially people don't have the resources or the time to speak with a behavior professional. I can see how, unfortunately, they end up at wit's end and at a shelter. So I think it's amazing to have that prevention workshop and some tools to provide to people so that they don't end up just passing the buck on to the next person, which is kind of what happens. Okay, so another question, pivoting again. I know I've been like bouncing around all over the place. What are some effective strategies for managing and caring for community cat colonies to ensure their health and well-being? Basically, like what can listeners do to help community cats near them?
Right. Right. Well, so I would recommend, if you do have community cats that you are concerned about, you reach out to any local Trap-Neuter-Return
Mm-hmm.
organization to make sure that you know what's what in your neighborhood. And so if you reach out to them, or if you post on your local next door or Facebook or whatever, just to say, hey, I'm concerned about these cats. They're ear tipped, but I just want to say, if there's a way that I can help and engage or whatever, support it. I just want to know. And it's so funny because we're so isolated from our neighbors now because of social media,
Yes.
that nobody knows their neighbors, and it's
Yeah.
the cats are really the only thing that are providing the glue in our communities. So when you do the paper collar thing,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, whoa, I didn't realize four other people were feeding this cat. Now I know all my neighbors, and I needed to borrow a lawnmower or something and my neighbor loaned the lawnmower to me because we all know each other now. So
Yeah.
now we're doing all these other things. So it's recreating these physical neighborhood bonds that we used to have, with the sugar. We used to all,
Right. Yeah.
share the sugar. And we've lost that with this whole social, like you have to, if you want to touch anybody, you got to post it. You got to post about it, right?
Yeah.
And so the cats are really the thing that's bringing us back together in the community, and it's really good. So it gets you to get to know the neighbors, to find out what's going on. And then also, if you are interested in expanding on that, certainly volunteering with an organization is a next step. And if you don't have those resources in your community, if you're finding
Mm-hmm.
that you are in a TNR desert, or you're in a resource desert, then reach out to the Community Cats podcast. We're all about starting new initiatives. We are all about being a sprouter, a growth maker, a image changer. And just come to the Community Cats podcast. We have an online cat conference Facebook group, which has all the folks that have attended our events. It's like 3,000 folks of people who are actively helping Trap-Neuter-Return. And so there's a lot of engagement out there, and there are a ton of supportive resources if you wanted to start a new initiative, or just help the cats that are in your backyard. And if someone else is feeding them, I will say, if you're feeding in multiple locations, that's tough. So you want to make sure you have one designated feeder, and then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you help with buying the food. Also, you have to think about your community cat or cats might get injured at some point, and vet
Right.
care is super expensive. And so if you can get a collaborative group together in your neighborhood to sort of say, donate every now and again $5 here and there, and just save it in the coffee can, so
Mm-hmm.
that then if any of the community cats have an injury, you aren't faced with questioning whether you can afford treatment or not.
Right. And I think also something that I found, because when we moved from New York City out here to Connecticut, and we live in the forest where there's oddly like a crazy amount of community cats, but super feral, right? I've been doing more TNR here than I did in New York City, which I did not think was possible, but it's been really crazy. But we're 100% in a desert, like in a resource desert. There's nothing. And I found that talking to vets about, like, listen, I'm shouldering the burden of the cost here. Can we, come to some kind of agreement on like a, low cost spay neuter, because there's no low cost spay neuter clinics here. They've all closed. That can be an effective strategy for starting to get some resources in your community. Just talking to, especially a vet that's not managed by private equity, because those private equity managed giant corporate vets are not going to be able to work with you, but like a small vet can often be really helpful. And those vets have become a great resource, so that we can continue to do this work, because we have TNR'd so many cats since we've moved here. And now they all show up on our deck every night to eat. So we've got like a whole community of cats and raccoons and possums, and everybody's having snacks every night. But that's just my one tip, is if you're really in a resource desert, is to just show up and talk to people. And it can be awkward because, like you said, we're all behind our phones all the time. But, if you show up, people will often really want to help you. How do you address concerns from community members who might be wary of or opposed to the presence of community cats in their neighborhoods? Because I know, at least from my time in New York, this was a big problem, that people were always like, get these cats out of the neighborhood. How do you handle people who really have a difficult time with managed community cat populations?
Well, you used a great word there. You said managed.
Yes.
Right. And I personally have never run into anybody with issue with managed, which means 100% sterilized.
Right.
So just by feeding is not enough. So whenever I've run into any sort of conflicts, it's been around colonies that aren't 100% sterilized.
Got it.
And the population is not, it's not managed, it's not monitored for newcomers and that kind of thing. Once the colony is 100% sterilized, everybody is ear tipped, it's focused, it's protective. You have minimal vacuum effect, which means out of towners are coming in to the area. Usually that then mitigates the situation. And the other thing too is, obviously I listen to the folks when they have their issues. I try and listen to see what's the concern. Is there something, is it because they're destroying their garden or something? So is there a tool we can use to help prevent those cats from getting into the garden and digging things up or getting on the car and making paw marks on the car or whatever. So, find out what the issue is too, and listen and work on it. But also if you get the colony 100% sterilized, you're going to have at least a 40% reduction in the number of cats there anyway. So they're going to see an immediate reduction and go, wow, this is great. This is wonderful. They'll see some movement and improvement. The other thing is, a lot of people don't get that these community cat colonies or groups are created by who I call Adam and Eve, right? So, we have Adam living in one house, friendly, unneutered Adam, friendly, unspayed Eve living in another house. Adam starts spraying in the house is a rental, the landlord's going to evict them, so Adam has to go outside, right? Eve is in heat, she's spraying all over the place too, and yowling all night long, and the baby's crying, and so then Eve has to go out. Well, there you go, there's Adam and Eve. We know what the rest of the story is. It's a lack of resources at that level, that lack of access to care for Adam and Eve. If Adam got neutered and Eve got spayed, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Sure.
So, because Adam would be, much less likely to spray around the house, and, Eve wouldn't be going into heat. I've had a cat in heat in my house, and it drives me nuts.
Same. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's like we would have solved this problem much higher up on the sort of the food chain if we had gotten them access to affordable spay neuter. But no, they get pushed out, and then they have their kittens, and that's the beginning of the story. And so once we start talking about how this is it's a home base problem, it's a home base situation, and that we have to provide some reactive support to the cats out there, we also have an obligation to those cats, those owned cats. And this is why the owned cat programs or spay neuter programs are just so critically important to be able to reduce the cat overpopulation situation in general.
Do you have advice? This is, again, just for my interest, and hopefully it's relevant for listeners. This is just a podcast about what I am interested in. Do you have any suggestions for speaking to people who are from communities that may not believe in spay neuter for cultural reasons? Like, I came from one of those communities in New York City, and I really did 20 years of work trying to talk to people about, like, hey, it was exactly what you said. The male cats were peeing in the house. They'd put the cat on the street. I would take the cat, get it neutered, get it adopted. Then they put the female cat on. It was just that same thing over and over and over again for 20 years. And it was very difficult to make a dent in what was a real just cultural difference in people not believing in altering their pets. And I understand the basis for that thought, but not the inaction, right? So I don't know if you have any tips on changing people's minds or how to approach those situations. Or maybe you don't.
So, I mean, I honestly, it's interesting because I haven't really run into that in the communities that I've worked in.
Right.
That have had that diversity level, but where it's been so I think I go to the kittens. I mean, this is how we've also sold it to the politicians too. Is, you see that kitten that was hit by a car. You see that those, and maybe more with the kids too, which is, we don't need to see these kittens out there. I mean, being an adult cat outside, it's not ideal. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but,
Right.
but once you hit about a year to a year and a half, and if you are a survivor community cat, you figured it out. You figured out how to make it out there, and you've got your support. But the kittens, my goodness, it's a tough life for a kitten out there.
Yeah.
There's so many predators. So, I sort of bring it back to the most vulnerable, and just to say, this is not what we want to see out there in the community on a regular basis, and this is what's happening. And so again, I would listen as much as possible to that, but the other thing too is, the outdoor cat with the rodents and all that type of stuff. I mean, there's a public health issue behind that too. And so you can also say, obviously, in Massachusetts, at least you must have your cat vaccinated for rabies, and, while you're there. And if you offer it for free, I mean, getting people to pay for it is really tough. But if you offer it for free or for like $25, they're going to say, I can get rabies vaccine and I can get a spay neuter, then that is ideal. There's more interest there. I did a project in Chelsea, Massachusetts about 5 years ago or so, and we would offer free microchipping and rabies vaccine, and for the community. And obviously, while people were there, then you have the conversation about spay neuter and all that kind of stuff while they're there, and try and get that hooked in. So we'd get like over 300 attendees at these events, and over half of them were cats. And I was amazed because, I can get the dog side of it. They've got licensing. They've got to get their vaccines for the dogs. I was thrilled with how engaged the community was. And it's a very Hispanic community. And they were very, as well as a variety, it's very mixed culturally. Variety of folks that were just really, really interested in coming out and getting the necessary vaccines and microchipping identification for their cats. It was really phenomenal, the support. So again, I've probably worked in 4 or 5, doing targeted projects within specific communities. And I haven't had major, statistically impactful major problems. It's a handful of people. So it's like, it's like the few, what do you say? I mean, I don't mean to say bad apples, but the few bad apples in the back, right? So, and then you also depend on the neighbors being influential too, right? So I'm not going to walk into a community and convince the community that this is what they need to do with their cats. But it'll be neighbors.
Exactly. Can you, again, something you just mentioned, the vacuum effect. Do you have any strategies to keep the vacuum effect from happening? Because I'll say, at least here, there's, again, like I said, there are so many community cats. And if you remove a few, you get the friendly ones, you get them adopted out. Or let's say you get one and you get it adopted out, 5 to 10 more fill that space. They are just constantly coming. And it is a problem that people are constantly dumping their cats, and there's just constantly more cats being bred. But there doesn't seem to be a way, even in a managed colony, to stop the vacuum effect.
So 2 components. One is you have to grow the moat. So when your colony has been fully sterilized, you have to grow that region larger. So like we started out in Newburyport, just covering Newburyport and the towns that were touching Newburyport. So, but we started out originally just focused on Newburyport. And then we added Salisbury, and then we added Amesbury. And in Newburyport, when we, got the downtown under control, we had to go to the industrial park.
Right.
And we also, what we did too was we would get periodic drop-offs at our 14 feeding stations. And so obviously we trap them, we bring them in, put them up for adoption in the adoption center. But we also were very clear with the community as to, if you are in need, you need to contact us and we'll respond quickly for emergency situations. And so so we would have then carriers left in front of the door of the shelter or whatever. I'd much rather that than being let loose at a feeding station, right?
Yeah.
So that's one step closer. And now Nowadays, we don't have anybody. Like, it's very rare that there's a cat left in a carrier at our front door. It's more if they call in, they know that we're quick to respond. We have that capacity, and we work those cats in. But it's like the evolution over time. Now, some shelters, some adoption centers operate as limited admission, and so that's where people get pushed back because there's no immediate response, and they're forced to make really unfortunate and difficult decisions. And so that's where you're seeing, some of that abandonment coming out, which is extremely unfortunate. You're also not moving the needle because you may not have enough affordable spay neuter services for the owned population. So in 2000, I started a spay neuter program on Sundays, free spay neuter any cat in a trap, free.
Amazing.
They still happen every month. In Methuen, Massachusetts, and we used to have like 100 to 120 cats at those Sunday clinics. Now we have maybe 35, and people travel from all over Rhode Island, New Hampshire,
sure, yeah,
travel all over to come. But from 2000 to 2008, we weren't moving the needle statistically with regards to intakes into the shelter because of those. That we were just being reactive. We weren't at the source. So your area, in order to be impactful to change that outdoor cat population, needs to offer affordable spay neuter services for owned cats. I would say in a 5x to 10x range above what you think your community cat population. Yeah. If you think you've got 200 community cats out, you need to try and have spay neuter capacity for 2,000 cats or 1,000 to 2,000 cats, that kind of thing. So. And that will just hit it right we did this in Lowell, Massachusetts. We had the Catmobile. We attacked the situation on the owned cat side. We had our mobile spay neuter clinic, our Catmobile, every Monday there doing spay neuter surgeries. So we did approximately 800 or so spay neuters for cats in the course of over 3 to 4 years. And they went from being incredibly overwhelmed with cats, overwhelmed to what's a kitten? We never see a kitten anymore. We don't know what a kitten is. We had a pilot group, Lowell TNR. They were, but they were working on the reactive, the TNR, and then that group, the number of TNRs for community cats out there got so low that the Lowell Humane Society absorbed that group.
Wow.
Because they took on then the TNR obligation. So we have that story. It's actually on the United Spay Alliance's website. The whole statistical story about how they got all the numbers to drop substantially. But it's this TNR spay neuter as well as the owned cat spay neuter. It's a dance that we have to do together in order to be most impactful.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. It just, it is overwhelming thinking about doing that in this community, which has just thousands and thousands of community cats. But
it's so possible. I mean, when I started these meetings with the Lowell Humane Society, I went in, we'd have these monthly meetings.
Yeah.
Woman out there who fed community cats and stuff, and great for her, wonderful. And I said, honestly, how many cats do you think we have? How many cats out there need assistance? And she really thought we had over 1 million cats in the community.
Yeah.
And that's what I heard was this person saying, I don't know, but this is overwhelming now, right?
Yeah.
And I said, let's go on discovery. Let's see what we can do. Let's see how many we can do, and let's see how we can evaluate our impacts from that standpoint. And luckily, Lowell Humane was pretty much the only game in town, and so we could really use them to monitor our successes.
Right.
And, so I think you have to get a grasp of things. And so at the podcast, we're actually creating a community cat calculator.
Oh,
so
cool.
That organizations can take some geographic and socially economic information and really calculate the number of owned cats that they need to try and provide services for, and the number of feral cats that would need to have TNR support. And owned cats, it doesn't mean you have to pay the whole bill. It could be, you could have a veterinarian do a third. You could have the owner do a third. You could have your organization pay a third. There is some collaborative efforts out there to try and make things more affordable. So, and neuters, my word. So if you do a neutering campaign, you can, right off the top, you'll reduce your cat overpopulation by about 20% in 1 year. So,
Yeah, and those are so much easier to handle too.
Right.
Neutering's way easier.
There's proposals out there right now. California has a pending proposal that to allow technicians to do cat neuters.
Ah,
So
yeah.
I'm hoping that'll be a trend, because you can really do a lot. I mean, a lot of people go, oh, well, no, it's the space. You want to make sure you get the space. But there's some veterinarians out there that, they want to give back to the community, but they're just exhausted, right?
Of course, yeah.
And then, but if you say, hey, can you just throw off a few neuters? Like, can you just do that? And we also, at the United Spay Alliance, where I'm the director of strategy, we're all about getting high quality, high volume spay neuter techniques in private practice. So private practice is willing and able to do more surgeries during the course of a day, a week. And at the end of the day, they can still charge a lot of money. They can still make money.
Sure.
But it's going to reduce their burnout if they adapt these high quality, high volume spay neuter techniques also.
Of course. One study I've always been really interested in doing, but I don't think that the technology might be there now with cat DNA testing. I'm not sure. I'd have to reach out again. But I've always been really interested in looking at community cat populations and seeing how many of them are interrelated on the male side, so that we see how many male cats are actually contributing to the birth of new kittens every year in various communities, and how many male cats are not contributing, right? And to see how that informs what we do in terms of TNR. I mean, obviously we would still TNR whoever we can get, but I'm very curious if it's just a select few males who are able to breed with all of these females, or if it's all of the males, which I don't know. I'm just curious. I'm personally just curious about this.
Well, and I think that we overestimate the actual reach of an unneutered male cat. I think that because, I mean, based on, I just did this situation in Vermont where they did about 402 counties in the southern Vermont. They did like 400 neuters and a campaign. And, that's not a lot of cats. Yeah. It's really not a lot. And it's very quiet now. Very, very quiet. And so they continued with their own spay neuter program, going on. And those cats could have been owned. They could have been unowned. They could have been anything, but they were neuters. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's like, just do something.
Yeah.
Take what you can get, and it'll make a difference. And I personally, especially in a more rural area, you're just, the male cat's just not going to get around. Like in urban areas, male cats can get around a lot more.
They do. And I've put trackers on them, like real-time GPS trackers on one who now lives with us. Our cat, Kevin, who, was a total feral Avenue D, like East Village street guy who fathered so many kittens all over the place until I did TNR on him. And as his testosterone levels down, he would come visit and get food, and then eventually decided to come live with us. But after I TNR'd him, because he was friendly after a while, I put a little GPS tracker on him to see where he went. His territory was insane. It was so huge. And it was pretty much all of downtown. He was crossing 6-lane highways. He was going all over the place. I was shocked and then terrified also for him. And obviously he knew what he was doing, but I was like, Kevin, no, what are you doing? Where are you going? And it was so funny to just watch him walk around at night and really go check on and I'm sure he had ladies stashed in every corner, thankfully he was shooting blanks at that point, but it was very interesting. What resources are available for individuals or communities looking to implement TNR or address community cat issues? And I know we already talked about a lot of these, but are there any that you can think of in addition to the ones that you guys provide or ones that you provide that you haven't mentioned?
In terms of resources, so if you are thinking about getting involved in Trap-Neuter-Return, potentially a group or something like that, there is Neighborhood Cats has published a book called the TNR Handbook, and it's available for PDF download on their website. It also comes as part of the package with the TNR certification program, and so I just recommend that as a first step of just getting on the whole process and everything, rather than going, you should go here, you should go there.
Right.
Neighborhood Cats and allies still have really the best resources out there, along with the Community Cats podcast, but we're more in the listening world, more in the visual, the videos and that kind of thing. So I always dream about folks listening, subscribing to our podcast. They're out sitting there, having their Dunkin' Donuts or their coffee or whatever, sitting in the car at 2:00 in the morning, waiting for that last cat to go out under the drop trap or go into the trap. And they have nothing else to do, but they're going to listen to Stacy on the podcast talking about how people are also out there at 2:00 in the morning trying to trap that last cat and prevent, more kittens from being born out there and that kind of thing. So, please do subscribe to the podcast.
Yes.
But in terms of reading, I think the TNR handbook that Neighborhood Cats has put together is just really the greatest 101 type situation for starters.
Okay. And just to wrap up, what are some of the most rewarding aspects of working with community cats, and what keeps you motivated to continue this work? Because I know it's so easy to have compassion fatigue, especially when we do this kind of animal work.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest. I had a lot of fatigue when I was running the adoption center, when I was running the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society after 16 years. I learned a lot about how to cope. The shower was my friend. It was like my go-to place to just sort of decompress from everything. I had 2 little kids at the time. At some points I had upwards of 10 cats in the house, and I'm with anybody out there who's kind of feeling like their cup is running over, right? They always say the cup is too full. You gotta make sure you're not too full. I used to always practice the skill of delegating one thing every week. I would always try, regardless of whether it was picking up one donation can or was, recruiting one more foster or, finding a foster home who would take a litter of kittens or whatever. It was, just trying to delegate out something that, like a litter of kittens that I had in my house, get those kittens into a foster home to offload something in my house, something that was impacting me. Always trying to delegate something out to, or giving it away, just to be comfortable with that practice, because I think in this world it's so easy for us to say, oh, I'm the only one who can do this. This is and I had to give away things that I loved. So if you found something that wanted, in my weird and strange way, I loved going to the bank and doing the deposits, right? I loved it. But I gave that job away to somebody else just because then it was, would take time off I would save time, and then I would have room to breathe. And feel comfortable with that. So that's my little tip for people who feel like they're in the middle of it, and also to stay focused and really do follow a targeted model to the best of your capabilities, but ask for help outside of your region. So collaborate with others so that they can work more efficiently and effectively with others. And so I honestly am energized about the work that I am doing right now. And I feel like I have to put a public apology out to sort of the general world, because in my little bubble, Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society has been really successful, incredibly successful. We did our first feline leukemia adoption in 1996. We were a cageless shelter by 2003. And so, we wanted to always be kind of on the cutting edge. I feel that everybody should have what the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society has. It is not impossible. It is, there's nothing special about what we have done. And I feel that I, in my world, would like to replicate this everywhere. I want these resources to be available for all people as well as the community cats. So we need to find out where those droughts are, the resource droughts. And we need to think strategically about how are we going to build up those areas to have the same levels of coverage, and treat our cats with respect and our families with respect, and ensure that, everybody's got the tools in the toolkit that they need to be able to be empowered to help the cats in their community. Because I didn't know, I grew up in my own little bubble out there in Massachusetts, and I was like, oh, the rest of the world must act like this. It must be like this, right? And then I kind of grew up a bit, and I realized, you know what? It's not happening elsewhere. And I really think that's what I can bring forward. What we at the Community Cats podcast can bring forward as a team is these tools and really help other people build them, develop them, create organizations that are supportive and embrace cats rather than want to harm cats in any way.
I agree. And I would argue that you're the special sauce of your region there. So give yourself some credit.
I don't know. I think it's all, who knows the why behind it, but let's create that why somewhere else, right? It doesn't have to be one person.
That is true.
Right.
That is true. But I just, give yourself a little pat on the back too. I think that's something that also, especially rescue people, don't tend to do enough of. So
thank you.
Just and then I just want to end with the question that we got from a listener, which is, how can I trap local ferals when everyone feeds them?
Yes. So we do have a free webinar, and it is called The Drop Trap, A Trapper's Best Friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it is done with in partnership with Neighborhood Cats. The team at Neighborhood Cats does the presentation. I think we hold that webinar annually. We have what's called on YouTube the Everything TNR playlist. Mm-hmm. So YouTube Everything TNR playlist, and the Drop Trap webinar is right there. It's a great tool so that if you do have people feeding and they're not willing to pull the food, obviously you want to ask your neighbors to please pull the food and see how that goes. But then using a drop trap is really a trapper's best friend, and you can go and be very selective about who you trap and all that. So tune in to the Community Cats podcast, the Drop Trap webinar, and then you can always feel free to reach out to me at Stacy at communitycatspodcast.com if you have any further questions.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much, Stacy, for being on the podcast. And I want to encourage everyone to listen to the Community Cats podcast. I can't talk anymore. Like, follow, subscribe, review, all the things that you're supposed to do on a podcast. For all of you who I know are super interested in helping rescue and TNR cats. And just thank you so much for all of your knowledge and all the help that you are giving to our community cats. And thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful show, and I think it's great.
Yay, thank you. Thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please go ahead and give us a rating and or a review. We'd super appreciate it. You can find our social medias, Instagram and TikTok at Hiss and Tell Podcast. For cat behavior consultations, go to catitude-adjustment.com. Music provided by Cat Beats.